So I've now seen episodes 2 and 3 of Rick and Morty season 7, and oh man, is this getting interesting. So originally after watching episode 2, I kinda regretted not talking about it last week, but now after finishing episode 3 as well, I do think these two should just be watched together. These last 3 episodes I think should be watched together because they really kind of focus on different aspects of Rick's mind. From what I remember, the first episode kind of focused on Rick's relationship towards his friend. In episode 2, it focused on his relationship with Jerry and also himself, kind of. And in episode 3, it focused on his past relationships. The one with Unity, the one with the president, and the one with his therapist. And it's really so far feeling like a Rick-focused season, if that makes sense. I guess it should just be called Rick and Rick, am I right? Hold your applause, I'll be here for the next couple of minutes. So now I guess it's appropriate to try to break both episodes down, starting with episode 2. I forget the title of it because they always have weird titles. It focused on Jerry and Rick. Jerry kind of wanted Rick to kind of help him get his Rick back from Gene because he could tell Gene was lying. That ended up causing them to have some sort of a scuffle. So Rick decided, hey, let's swap minds. Not brains, minds. Jerry, and obviously the audience as well, I feel like we didn't understand. They did it anyways, and they both couldn't handle the pressure of the other's mind, so they killed themselves. And that put a lot of stress on the supercomputer, so when the supercomputer put them back together, they were kind of mismatchy. You know, there were some parts of Rick's brain still in Jerry, some parts of Jerry's brain still in Rick. So now they feel like they're two completely different people, but the same person, if that makes sense. Like, they're no longer Rick and Jerry, they're Jericky and Rickary, which would have made the most sense for me to call them, but they ended up referring to themselves as the term burgers and fries. And obviously we've seen Rick interact with other Ricks before, and for the most part it seems like Rick does not get along well with other Ricks. We've seen Jerry interact with other Jerrys before, and Jerry quite likes working with Jerry, honestly. He even got along with the Jerry-like Rick that one time, or Dumb Rick, I forgot what his name was. So mushing both brains together and kind of making them collide with each other kind of put them in this weird situation where they were bickering for the first couple of minutes until they realized, hey, we both love our kids, let's try to save our kids, and that ends up making them have this weird friendship mingle between them. And honestly speaking, it was really nice seeing these two get along because they've had episodes in the past where they start bickering or are forced to work together towards something, but then at the end they're like, hey, you're not half bad. But in the next episode where they work together, they're starting to bickering again, yada yada yada. So I really like the difference between here where it's like, we're just gonna cram both of your brains together and just make y'all kind of see how each other work, which can be seen as maybe generic Freaky Friday stuff, but I think it was different enough for that it worked. But the downside on that is while they're getting along, they're neglecting their family. So inevitably, their family ends up not wanting them to be together. They ended up trying to track them down, and they ended up getting caught by some alien mob bosses, by some alien gangsters. And with Burgers and Fries, seeing that their relationship was kind of getting in the way of their family values type stuff, they decided they should sacrifice themselves and just combine as a whole. They're no longer Burgers and Fries, they're now Jericky, a weird amalgamation of all of their positive attributes. And by positive attributes, they kind of just seem more robot-y, if that makes sense. Like it had to lose a lot of their personality, which I guess can be seen as their negative traits, to end up becoming this weird savior to save his family without any morals and able to hear the death of atoms in space. Very weird and dark. But that's really the important part of that episode. Obviously they end up being separated again at the end and end up bickering again like they said they would. And it was just a great little funny introspective moment to have with both of these characters because they don't get a lot of screen time together, honestly. Also, a lot of the family hasn't had a lot of screen time so far in this season, it feels like. Like they're there, but they're very, very, very side charactery. I feel like in previous seasons, family was kind of the forefront of things. They're very much so background characters at this point. Even Morty doesn't really feel that important for it to be called Rick and Morty, you know what I mean? But before we get too deep into the family stuff, let's talk about episode 3. The president came quickly infatuated with Dr. Wong, which is the therapist's name. So for the whole first half of the episode where they're going to try to figure out what's wrong with Virginia, every time Rick gets the opportunity, he's like, yo, don't date my therapist. please don't look at her, please don't try to bone her. And at this point, it feels like that's all the president could think about on the slide. It's like, damn, that therapist, dog. Which obviously Rick doesn't like, and it makes things so much worse because once they get to Virginia, they realize they're all lovey-dovey and all crime-free and stuff because they're in a hive mind. Yes, unity has returned. So I remember there being 2 episodes where Rick ends up having interrelationships with a planet. And I know one of them was kind of metaphorical because unity involved everybody within the planet. And the other one was a lot weirder because they had these gelatin Ricks around and they were all like clanning up. A lot of people were siding with Rick and a lot of people were siding with Jerry. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I get these episodes mixed up a lot. So I can't remember the last time we've seen unity, but I know we've seen unity before, and it was a big situation, and Rick tried to kill himself at the end of the episode, and it was this big somber moment and big reveal of, damn, he actually does have feelings for other people, and he hates himself. But he's hiding all of that right now to try to handle unity, because he's been ghosting her, she dumped him, so he doesn't want anything to do with her. Goddamn, do I know how that feels. But he doesn't have time to deal with that because the president keeps trying to flirt with his therapist. So he just ends up leaving, and the president ends up getting with said therapist, and they have this whole back and forth to the point where the therapist starts theraping on the president, and the president doesn't like that. The president has an ego, just like Rick does, just like Jerry does in the previous episode. Everybody has egos here, and his ego really wants himself to be liked by everybody on the planet, and him being the president means that doesn't happen. So when the therapist points stuff out like that towards him and she basically breaks up with him, he ends up doing the weirdest thing ever. He ends up being the mind of the hive mind and trying to control everybody to have this 100% approval that he really loves and wants to be president forever type stuff. But really that pimpo is just kind of contrived to get rid of talk to unity again because, my god, these guys have some serious tension going on here. And he brought his therapist with him because maybe the therapist can kind of coax Unity along to join in on the plan or something. But will it work? Yes, it does work. Originally Rick wanted her to lie, but she ends up not lying and just kind of saying it like it is. Rick is changing, but very effing slowly, and things piling up on him like the Rick Prime stuff, which Unity has heard about, which is why she's here, because she was worried about Rick. You know, that all just messes with him and kind of just makes him react very differently towards people. But Unity is kind of hurt because Rick told her he doesn't trust her, but since she does love and care for Rick at the end of the day, she does help out. But she doesn't stay for long because Rick said he doesn't trust her, but after helping out, he said, "Oh, but I do trust you now." And she's like, "No, I don't trust you though. Back off from me." So she leaves. Rick's now a little saddy boy. He's a little saddy boy again. I'm glad they didn't repeat the ending that they did for the last Unity episode because that kind of feel a bit, we're treading grounds, and doing it this way doesn't feel like they're retreading grounds. It feels like this world is just very massive with all of these characters, and all of these characters can interact whenever they want to. And with this being a very Rick focused season, it just makes sense for Unity to pop up, makes sense for the president to be here, makes sense for the therapist to be here. How long are we going to continue just focusing on Rick for this season? I'm very curious about. Normally I'll sit here and complain about things being episodic or leaving a story behind to have these episodic episodes, and normally I'll be like, I don't mind episodic episodes. I feel like this was the only way for Rick and Morty to have come back, was for it to be more episodic-y and have these character dynamics we don't see often from Rick and Morty, or maybe that we see all the time, but maybe in a different light. I guess what I'm trying to say is these episodes feel a lot better written than some of the episodic episodes we got in the past, but also, to be fair, it's probably not hard to be better than an episode where Morty and Summer end up having to make a giant space incestuous baby in some sort of way. That's still out there somewhere. Is the baby Naruto gonna make a comeback? That'd be weird, but also interesting. But while I do complain about the family not getting a lot of shine in this season so far, it is also just very nice to have like well-written Rick adventures, having Rick's character be tested in a lot of different ways. How are you different from Rick Prime? Let's show you in this adventure where in Rick Prime's reality he'd probably just kill Jerry. You decide to entertain Jerry a little bit and end up swapping minds with him and end up having this big adventure where you two do kind of like each other, but you won't admit it to each other because you guys have this ego. Rick Prime doesn't have a relationship with the president or his therapist because I don't think he has an original planet to go back to be fair, because that's the planet where everybody sees Lovecraftian creatures, is that planet, and he wasn't living there to begin with, to be fair. I always feel bad for doing these episode reviews because I always feel like there's something that I'll probably forget to talk about or something that I'll miss out, but maybe I'll get to talk about it in the next episode reviews. Who knows? I'm really curious about what the next handful of episodes are going to be. I didn't really look at any of the titles for the next episodes because I like being surprised about what episodes are coming. I think that's the best way to look at Rick and Morty. I think that's the best way to look at any series. You're just surprised and you're just going to see how the story folds out. I don't like being spoiled for stuff, but at the same time, I don't really care. But with that being said, what are your opinions on episodes 2 and 3 for season 7 of Rick and Morty? I'd really like to know. Leave it in the comments down below, and I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. I can't believe there's been 7 seasons of Rick and Morty, and I've been talking about them since at least season 4 or 5. I think it is season 5 on the main channel, season 6 on this one, and now we're doing season 7. That's pretty cool, I think. But what are your opinions so far on this season? Tell me, please tell me, and I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. Okay, goodbye.